Let's talk about poultry processing with Dave McNiel. Before we get started, I want to remind you that this is sponsored by the Oregon Institute of Occupational Health Sciences and the Oregon Healthy Workforce Center, with support from the Oregon State Association of Occupational Health Nurses and the Columbia-Willamette chapter of ASSP. And that's a mouthful. We are continuing these 2 Tuesdays a month through June. I am still looking for a speaker for our May 11th event. If any of you have a suggestion, particularly something we haven't covered yet, or would like to volunteer. And then the event after that on May 25th, we have our number 8, public facing workplaces. What about restaurants? Where we're very fortunate to have Lisa Kinsley, Human Resources, McMinimum's pub and breweries and hotels join us. So we're looking forward to that. So let's kick this off. Good morning, Dave. Many people know Mr. Dave McNiel through some of his volunteering efforts with the GOSH, the Governor's Occupational Safety and Health Conference, where he's coordinated volunteers for many years. And we all missed not having that this year, certainly. And also as an active member of ASSP with our local chapters. So Dave, I welcome you, and I would just have you just just a little bit, a few sentences, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Share with us what your responsibilities are at Foster Foods.
Well, at Foster Farms, I am the safety and health manager, and as such, that's my responsibility, making sure that people are safe while they're doing their jobs, and that can be coming to the job site as well as leaving the job site. Is that short enough?
That's perfect. And it's regional that you have responsibility. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I used to be responsible for everything outside of the borders of California. Foster Farms is even in the South. But as I've developed other individuals to take on areas, I've released those areas. So now I'm just the PNW safety manager, which covers California and Washington, sometimes Idaho, and then wherever else I'm needed.
Thanks, Dave. That's great. Yes, you're being very concise. Dave and I were chatting about how we both have often the tendency to talk long. And so we're both being on good behavior today. Thank you, Dave. So my first kind of real question is, we know that in food and meat processing, working in close proximity to others has presented a particular challenge during the pandemic. What did you find most successful in dealing with this? Yeah.
Well, actually, what I can say is that now that we've been this long in the process, it affects all of the private sector where they have production going on, because people are in close contact for various different reasons. But the most important thing that one can do is plan ahead, have a plan and train on the plan, and always keep in step with the plan. But the plan has to be evergreen to adapt with all of the changes that you're going to come across and things that you have no idea about. Now, I sit in a real unique opportunity because the Northwest Center for Occupational Safety, it's out of the University of Washington. They invited me to attend and audit a program. And the program had to do with, I'm a chemical engineer and I look for existing wheels, but the program had to do with swine and MRSA at a swine facility. I do chickens, so it very applicable. And then here came a human case called COVID-19. Put together a plan according to that training that I got with respect to the Northwest Center for Occupational Safety and Health, as well as, and they had 2 other members, Center for One Health Research and the Harborview Medical Center, which is a complement in Washington that OHSU is in Oregon. And so I learned a lot, and I just picked up from that training, grabbed a couple of people, HR because of human element, and the quality assurance because you need to make sure that everything's good going out the door. Otherwise, there's no money to pay for stuff. And we developed a plan. Okay. So there might be things that are out there that you think have nothing to do with what you're doing, but take a closer look. You might find cut and paste works really well because I didn't have anything for COVID, but I was enrolled in that class in February. COVID came and started slapping us in February. Now, one of the things that helped me notice I had the problem is attendance. We all have a human factor that is training, that is dealing with human beings. And what we do is we have people who are out that don't cause a problem with the attendance because they're out. Could be me. But there is also people who, when they're not here, we've got a problem. And so we graph the illness, we call it the fluenzal illness time frame. Starts for us in October, ends for us in somewhere in March, and we do the percent of that time frame versus the percent of absenteeism that we have, and it helps us be able to, okay, tomorrow we're going to need 14 more people, or tomorrow we're going to need 40 more people. The graph is extremely asymptotic at the leading edge, and it is extremely, what do they call that? Oh, I think I just said it backwards. Extremely exponential at the leading edge and asymptotic at the coming out edge. And so you can tell right away if you're going to have a problem. In March, the news caused a big problem for us. It scared our people. People stopped coming to work, and we went from our normal curve to exponentially off the curve. And so we had to start in figuring out what to do. And we developed, like I said, I took the swine influenza, the swine MRSA, and I then turned that into a COVID and rapidly got ready for everything that was going to hit me. All right. So that's it in a nutshell with respect to trying to respond to that. What you do is you segregate, you control atmospheres, you try to corral populations to understand what's going on, those sort of things, so that you can anticipate and control. So there's a lot of the things that I learned in that, which is a zoonotic situation, and applied it to the human. Separation by barriers, separations by airflows, separation by PPE, all of those sort of things. And there may be questions that are more pointed at some of those things. So if somebody has any. Or I think you said you were going to do that at the end. Okay.
Yeah. No,
Sorry.
that is terrific. And in the chat, it was pointed out the perfect way of framing it is evergreen. And I think we'd all agree with that. And I love your example as a way to show that, yeah, planning is important. And even if it's not in the exact problem you thought you were going to have, going ahead through that planning effort helps us be closer to what we need. So thank you for sharing that. That was super helpful. So now what I would ask you, we're a year, and as you mentioned, a year into, adopting safer work procedures and processes. What would you say are your greatest challenges right now, kind of at this point in time, or toughest things that are coming up? And I would just preface that by saying one of the things we really wanted to address as we began these COVID conversations is realizing that is changing. It's changing every week, right? You and I were talking about how there's going to be something coming out from CDC later today about masks for vaccinated individuals. And so right now, what are your greatest challenges or things coming up?
My absolute greatest challenge right now is caused by attendance. We are operating at about 50% of our normal manpower. We have 175 members short when we start the production today. So what we have to do is we have to look for replacements, which is a challenge. And you can't take a replacement and put them on a production line. You have to train them in your methods of controlling their safety and health while they're working. And it takes, about 4 to 5 hours to go through that training. And as I mentioned, we graph our absenteeism, and from that graph, we're able to understand what we need before the door opens or before people start calling in. And the process is really skewed because normally we have about 8 to 10% absenteeism at the height, and at the normal everyday, we have almost 3% absenteeism. And so you can see with 50%, you're not on the scale at all. And it causes safety to be really challenged. So that's the biggest challenge right now. Then when we get people trained and we have them out there working, we have challenges due to the COVID, and it's not illness in the workplace. That's all the absenteeism. But by the additional PPE and barriers and protocols and administrative controls that we need to make sure our people are following. And if you have somebody who's here and been working for the last 20 years, they've been through the COVID, they know what to do, and they are your best allies to help with individuals who are new. Remember that, by the way, the mask has to be over the nose. It has to be under the chin, those sort of things. And tricks for keeping your goggles clear, which, it's really a big challenge. And that leads into other safety issues.
Yes, 50%. That's huge. I want to do a follow-up to that, and you may not have an answer to this, but I'm curious. Do you have any sense of what percent of that loss are people who have left the job because they're fearful of doing that work?
It would be the difference between our 10%. So what that would be somewhere on the order of 30 to 40%. And it's difficult for us to understand. We hear or point at what, but we hear that we're trying to do the inoculations, and the Johnson & Johnson was pulled off due to other sort of the health scares. And so we feel that it has to do with the inoculations. But we're only guessing. We're only
Yeah,
guessing.
yeah, I understand. That's challenging. Maybe related to that, do you have anything you want to share? You and I've talked a bit about the vaccinations and inoculations that have been provided to employees. Is there anything you want to share on that about either how it's gone or how you all walked into that?
Oh, absolutely. Overall, our company has 13,000 employees. The state of California got very aggressive with us, and all of our 13,000 employees that live within the state of California are vaccinated if they so chose, because it's a choice. So we have all of those vaccinated because it is a company thing. We know who is, we know who isn't. And we're wanting to encourage those who aren't, to understand that, there's a lot who are, and everything is working well. Um, and so the fear factor should begin to relieve, and they should come back to work. Now, in states like Washington, where Washington is, it's not as aggressive as California, but it is very open to everybody who wants to get vaccinated can. Anybody 16 years and over can get vaccinated if they want, just walk up. And we made a relationship with the health department and with Safeway. Safeway is the agent that is coming in from the private sector and vaccinating our people. We hold vaccinations, or we're holding vaccinations every Wednesday. Our employees prefer Johnson & Johnson over the other two. And when we polled them, it's because of the fact that the other two are new technology as opposed to the Johnson & Johnson, which is traditional.
That's helpful. And, we're hearing from other organizations and workers, particularly workers who are in jobs with less control and flexibility, that it's difficult for them to schedule their vaccines, and it's difficult to fit it into a day. And so I think it's interesting to hear about organizations like yours and other, particularly some of our frozen foods in Oregon, who have scheduled them on site and the successes there. So I appreciate your kind of sharing those lessons. Have you, and you may not have needed to because you've offered it on site, have you offered any incentives? Because that's another thing certain organizations are playing with, right? Is we'll pay you for your time off. I'm curious if you've needed to do any other incentives.
Um, we purposely have not done incentives. We work with the GDC as our guiding principle. We're not allowed to do any incentives in anywhere with respect to safety and health. And this is a safety and health issue. So no, we have not done any incentives anywheres with respect to this inoculation and encouragement. Now, relationships are very important. And we've been able to be as proactive in Washington and Oregon with respect to the inoculations through our relationships that we've built with the health departments in those areas. What we've done in those areas where we can is 100% testing, COVID testing on a weekly basis of all of our employees. In our Kelso plant, due to the formidability of what that would mean, we do 60 random per week. And we've started that in January, and I think it was like the second week in January. We've had one positive case in all of the sampling that we've done. We've done it on site. We've used, again, the Safeway pharmacy to do all of that. So it's third independent party in all cases. We just provide the employee. That working relationship, doing those sort of things, has really put us in good graces with the health department. And what happened was it made it so we could easily do all the vaccinations, getting the serums available, and everything else. So relationship building, even if it feels like it puts you at risk, it's very important that it's considered and, as best as possible, implemented.
Thank you for sharing that example. And I would invite folks, we're kind of entering the time period now where you can certainly ask your questions if you have any in the chat. I'm going to follow up to what you just said, Dave, with the first question from Kate, which is who in your business is coordinating with the providers? Is that safety, HR, executive? And I guess prior to that, there was also the question, which kind of relates to that. It's a little different. Who's your trusted messenger in your workforce, right? We know that that trusted messenger, particularly with COVID, is so critical. So perhaps you can answer both those questions.
Okay. What I mentioned is we created a team at the beginning of my presentation where we have HR, safety, and QA working together to manage this whole thing. Now, what we did, because HR has the medical uh, factor in there and it has the human factor control and expertise. We use our our HR as our go-between with respect to the health department and us in all of our areas. They have the training, they have the expertise. Then what we do is our team takes that interface information and develops worst case scenario and how to break and meet those so that if we never have it, great, but if we do, we've got solutions.
Thanks, Dave.
I hope I answered the question.
No, no, you did. That's great. That's great. There's a second question that was asked here, kind of related to that. And you might have said this. I apologize if I missed it. Have you worked with the Oregon Health Authority? I know you have the Kelso plant.
Yes, we've worked with all of the health authorities in all of the different areas that we have people. So yes, both sides. And then in the other parts of the company, that's what they're doing as well. Some parts of companies, when they're large, are more aggressive and more successful than other parts. We here in the PNW have been that part in Foster Farms. We've developed a lot of things, and to be quite honest, we've been used as an example by LNI and Oregon OSHA with respect to program development and implementation.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. That's terrific to point out. I think your examples are really good in again, the importance of pre-planning, communicating with parties and partners. And then I like where you're going with the integration piece, right? Because that's where, you know, we've often said COVID-19 is such an example of why we need to consider what we're advocating in total worker health with integrating various pieces of our organization. And that was a great example. Here's another question, and it's one I was going to ask. So let me get two new questions. Probably we can take these next two. Is Foster Farms considering redesign of work environment or process flow as a larger response for the future after COVID? It seems like redesigning facility layout and process lines might be a great investment for future outbreaks and pandemic. And it's added, hopefully not, but we do best when we plan. So do you have some thoughts related to that?
What I would say is, why spend resources to tear down when the resources are already implemented? So I don't see additional stuff, but you have to be evergreen. Things can come in and ideas and concepts can raise their head, and you need to meet those, and that's where the evergreen is. But if you have barriers, why spend money to take those down? If you've trained, why take the opportunity for confusion to shut those down? So I think I'm going to call it zoonotic approach to the human element in foster farms will continue into the future. We've always asked ourselves, what would we do if a zoonotic disease from our product and our live side was to impact us? And because of the opportunity that came from Washington and the U of W's program, we developed our program, our COVID from that. It handles both. So no, I don't see anything but in strengthening what we already have. And I apologize if anybody may take, um, I don't know, offense of using a zoonotic approach to a human um, element, but that's all we had. There was nothing prior for this. And like I said, I'm a chemie. I look for spinning wheels, and if it works, I use it. And that's what I did.
Thanks, and I know you've given a couple shout outs for University of Washington's Northwest Center for Safety and Health. And maybe Nicole can stick a link in there to some of their training programs. And Nicole, if you have a chance to put that into the chat, I don't know that everyone on this call is familiar with their great coursework opportunities. Thank you. We've got one more question here, Dave. I think we've got time still, and I'll also give you an opportunity for anything you want to kind of conclude with. But do you have anything else you would advise other businesses to consider to set up on-site testing and vaccinations? Resources, relationships, you've talked about that a bit, but is there anything else that comes to mind? Because it is something that some organizations are struggling with right now.
Um, I I have two main guiding principles. I have a lot of these sort of things that I operate my life by. Um, One is that I make a positive difference for folks I don't know, and that would really help out those who are wanting to get their hands around the vaccinating. And then the other one is that to do my best isn't good enough. I first need to know what to do. And so it might be easy to say I have to vaccinate people, and then you find that you have to deal with the fear factor of new technology versus existing technology. So educate yourselves on the challenge. Look at the outer edges and make plans to reach those, but make sure your knowledge has a firm scientific basis. All right, and the inoculation, that's scientific. So people tend to follow that. So utilizing those tools, they should be able to come up with ways to properly set those things up.
Thanks. I think those are all great tips. I think a good follow-up to maybe this conversation today is in my follow-up blog. I will list some of the resources. New every day. There's newer resources developed on, approaching vaccines and inoculations for various workplaces. Many multi-language also kind of resources are out there. So we'll do that. Dave, I think I think that's great for today. And I really want to also applaud how you do help people. I have been privy to a couple of emails you've shared to other folks looking for vaccinations at their workplaces. And so we really appreciate your sharing of information today and beyond. So thanks. Any last comment before we close up for today?
Well, if people have questions and they have my email, they're more than welcome to email, and I'll get whatever successes that I've had over there to them to try.
Terrific, Dave. On that note, we thank you and let you continue on with your day. Thanks everybody for joining us today. And again, this recording will be added to the other recordings with our conversation, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks, Dee Dee.
Thank you.